Calling 911 by mistake isn't a crime, but misusing the emergency line can land you a serious fine, depending on where you live in this country. It's become such a problem in Brampton that the mayor wants to impose fines or other penalties for negligent use of the 911 system. Do you think that's fair? Every day, 1,800 emergency calls come into Peel Region, west of Toronto. But it's estimated 40% of them are like this.
This is the police. What's the emergency?
So basically, I bought an ice cap from Tim Hortons.
Is this a life or death emergency, sir?
No, it's like I bought one, but then they're not giving me a replacement.
The wrong coffee order, problems with the TV, 911 operators get all sorts of non-emergency calls, and they take precious seconds away from dispatching first responders to a scene. It's why Mayor Patrick Brown is looking into whether fines or penalties can be handed out for those types of calls.
If you call the fire department in a negligent manner, after a warning, you get fined. And so what we're looking at doing now in Peel, which is Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, is bringing in a fine after you've been given a warning.
Penalties already exist in several Canadian jurisdictions like Alberta and Nova Scotia, where the first fine is just under $5,000.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of guys playing cricket. So people walk on that walk path and they're playing cricket.
Okay, that wouldn't be a police matter. That would be a bylaw issue.
Brown says there is anecdotal evidence of wait times on 911 topping 6 minutes.
I've seen instances where there have been frightening emergencies where the individual is on hold, waiting for the 911 operator to finish with someone who's calling for an inappropriate purpose.
Brown hopes that if you hit people with a serious fine, it will make them think twice before making that non-urgent 911 call. So on all of our questions, we ask for your take, and this is the question. Do you agree with a penalty for misusing 911? Overwhelmingly, 95.5% of you do agree with having a penalty. Only 4.5% of you say, no, there shouldn't be. Let's bring back Dave and Angela. Angela, you start us out on this one. What do you think about having this penalty for people that misuse 911?
Yeah, I think there should be a penalty. I think all of those signs that say if you need help, dial 911, people are starting to see 911 as a customer service line instead of an emergency line of what it is. So maybe starting with an education blitz for Brampton area, Peel area, or just the rest of the country on what actually constitutes 911 emergency, because I think people see it as a customer service line, or I'm seeing from some of the anecdotes that there's some very heavy, I want to talk to the manager vibes coming from some of these callers. So a fine might help.
Yeah, before we get into that education piece, Dave, do you think that a fine is really good at helping dissuade people from using it?
Well, I suppose it's a statement for sure. But you have to do it hand in glove with a more robust communications strategy here, because you know, if the point where the sign says if you need help, call 911, well, it's pretty vague and it's a soft message. You know, if you are in, you know, if your life is in danger or it's a medical emergency, yes, call. So I think there's some educational issues around that. But even to, you know, Mayor Brown's point, anecdotally, he's throwing numbers out there. Surely we have enough data right now on hand to go through it and do a robust study and determine how many of those calls, in fact, are misused, are misrepresenting what the situation is, are malicious, and how much lead time or time does it actually cost to get around to responding to some real calls. I mean, to throw the anecdotes out, okay, let's not do that. If we're going to do this, let's all do it right. Line up the data, tell us why, and show us that this is, in fact, the problem that we're having, and these are the lives and the minutes that are at risk here. Then, yeah, $5,000, $10,000, sure. You know, I think those are big numbers, and that's going to get people's attention.
Yeah, and I think anecdotally he was talking about the sort of 6 minutes of somebody waiting, because we do have some numbers from the Peel Region Police, and this is what they have to say. With those 1,800 calls that they get in daily, 720 of them are deemed non-legitimate. That's more than 40%. So I guess the next question is, what are those unnecessary 911 calls? Well, here are some examples. We played some in the piece, but wrong Tim Hortons order. That might have been a little bit of a prank, but a tornado interrupting your TV show, keys locked inside the apartment, overflowing toilet, unhappy with the results at a hair salon, to the point that Angela was saying a little too much of a vibe of, I need to speak to the manager right now. But let's now dig into that sort of educational piece. Do you think enough people, Angela, understand that there is a 311 out there? Because in one of the calls that we played, they were talking about, well, there is somebody out there that is playing cricket and they shouldn't be playing there. And the woman, the operator, said, look, that's for 311. The complainant said, but it's Saturday. Is 311 actually going to answer my call? How key is that piece then in helping people understand that that is a viable option, that 311 will actually pick up?
Definitely. I think the education piece needs to be about the whole ecosystem. When she said that's a bylaw issue, some people may not even know the difference between a police matter and a bylaw issue. So even just how does your city work? How does the government work? And who do you call when you need help? If you are in an apartment building and your pipes burst, what's your superintendent's phone number for your building? Like, sometimes we just need to have more signs up, more resources so that people know who to phone instead of assuming that it's a police matter no matter who it is.
Dave, is this a civics issue or just a basic thing that people should be aware of, that they need to get taught as they grow up?
Well, the funny thing is, originally we only had 911, and then we had 311. I even saw one of the calls where somebody was complaining about their cable, and the operator said, well, call 611. So there are all the 11 numbers out there, and to try and conjugate exactly where you should be in any time of a crisis, limited there or otherwise in your life, is one thing. But we have diluted what 911 means, I think, in so many ways, because we offer these other services, ironically, where we were trying to actually silo all of the complaints in the right place. So I think there's a larger, I'm not sure it's a civics thing, because, oh my, that's going to get a little weedy in a hurry if in fact we say this is what 911 is for and only that. And then if you misuse this service, it could cost you $10,000 in fines. I mean, be right up front about it. That's going to catch people's attention.
But then what, Angela? Because, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, Dave talked about misuse or malicious calls, but there's also the accidental 911 calls. I worked in an office building once where to get an outside line, you had to dial 9, and we were a national company, so if you wanted to dial long distance, you had to dial 9 and then 1, and if you happened to go too fast, lots of times we were dialing 911 by mistake and ended up having police show up at our building. So I'm sure there's tons of that going on. Or how about your phone, your pocket dialing with your cell phone in your pocket? Lots of phones have that emergency override even when your screen is locked. So how many of the calls to 911 are these accidental calls? And what can we do, aside from just education, what can we do to fix that? There's got to be a better technological solution to that than just fines.
Yeah, one would think that there would be some sort of, I don't want to say adjudication, because then we're getting into a whole nother level, Dave, but to really judge what would be a non-legitimate 911 call before they're slapping a $5,000 fine on them. And I guess to that end, do you think $5,000 for first offense is too much, or should there be some sort of a investigation and, okay, look, this is where you were at, this is what you were saying, and was it really malicious or not? Yeah,
there's another layer of administration here, so that if I called 911 and it wasn't an emergency, I called you at the 911 center. You've got my number. Call back and say, okay, Dave, here's what happened. Here's as a result. We couldn't answer these other calls for the next 6 minutes. That put that at risk. Don't do that. The next time you do, it's going to cost you, fill in the blank. I think that level of eye contact that you're going to have to make with some of these folks is critical.
Angela, what do you think? Do you think that there is that piece to really enforce this that will be necessary?
Well, one of the issues with that is if you are going to start fining people, say 5,000 or even 1,000, which is a substantial amount of money, especially we just talked about the price of gas and groceries, people are going to want an appeal process. So now do you have to staff up in order to have this enforcement of these fines and the appeal process and that? Part of the issue with 911 emergency around across Canada is that they're short-staffed. And so if you start adding staff in order to just collect fines, now you've got a whole other layer of issues going on.
Yeah, and then that employment problem that Dave was talking about in our first debate, that's also an issue, right?